welcome. I'm Bill Kieffer. I know Garrett, you said you could hear me. Andrew, Edward, Jake, y'all have me? Perfect. Okay, I'm a first-time hop-in guy, so if we have some technical hiccups here, bear with me. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully I can moderate the conversation as it goes. If you do have questions, we'll try to grab them along the way. So let's see if we can't share my screen here. I did put together a little deck. And we'll try and get that in presentation mode. Okay, when I do that, I lose the moderation screen. So I'm going to run through the deck and see if we can't share some information, and we'll come back out of the share mode and see if we've got some questions along the way. So anyway, like I said, I'm Bill Kieffer. I'm President and Chief Advisor for Kieffer & Associates Limited. It's an independent advisory firm that primarily focuses on helping military veterans and others succeed in their career transition. Some of you may be in transition right now. Some of you may be looking at transition. But I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today will be relevant. So first, congratulations on the career transition. Whether this is your first job or whether you've done a 30-year career, you know, you're not the same person you were before the military or before your most recent job. Preparing for career transition can be tough. And not knowing what lies ahead makes it even tougher. And not knowing employers' perspectives, I think, can make things even tougher. You know, at the end of your military career, you have a lot of options. You could straight up perhaps retire, or you could work. And if you're going to work, or do you want to work for a for-profit or a non-profit, or do you want to work for a public company or a privately held company? Where do you want to be, and what kind of company do you want to work in? And you know, what industries do you want to work in and support, and what kind of function do you want to work with? Do you want to be in a startup company? You want to be with a company that's well established? You want to be a big company, a small company? The questions go on and on and on. And regardless of, you know, the many options and the many unknowns, the fact is you are where you are. And the world is yours to do with what you will. Now, that's great stuff, but it can be kind of scary. There's new tasks, there's new topics, there's new people, there's new processes. Now, for some of you, by circumstance and effort, this will be a piece of cake. But for many folks, this is kind of a challenging time. But this is a huge opportunity time in your life if you have your eyes and ears wide open, if you're willing to do the work you need to do, and if you're willing and able to let others help you. Now, I've been down this road. I spent 12 years as a U.S. Army officer, out with the 7th Infantry Division back in the day, then the 10th Mountain Division. I spent some time at the Combined Arms Support Command, the Logistics Management College, and a little bit of time in the Recruiting Command. And when I got out, I spent the next 22 years doing HR and talent management work at a very senior level for large, complex global companies. About 3 years ago, I stepped out of corporate America and became an entrepreneur. And that's where we are today. I've transitioned technically 4 times. I left the military for the civilian world and took a job in a pseudo-governmental organization doing county economic development. I stayed there for less than a year. I was a statistic. I was one of those 40-some% that leave their first job in the first year. And I went to corporate America as a training manager for an 1,100-person air freight facility in Toledo, Ohio, which is where I'm at today. Geographically, I'm in and around the Toledo area. I stayed with them for 11 years, did a variety of jobs, and wound up being the head of corporate strategy, HR strategy, and talent management globally. And then I moved from that company to another company and another industry. And then I moved from that next company to another company and another industry. And then eventually, as I said, I left the corporate world to enter the world of entrepreneurship. Transition, the point of this is that transition is a part of life. So if you're on your first transition out of the military into the civilian world, understand that transition is something that's going to be part of the rest of your career. I will tell you that the very first one, moving out of the military into the civilian world, if you will, was absolutely the toughest. I'm going to stop sharing here and go back and get visibility of the text box, I hope, and see if we're all connecting. Is this all working? Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. All right, now I'm going to share again. My transition was hard. Why was mine so darn hard? Well, I had little warning. I kind of had an unexpected change in marital status, didn't know it was coming. And when that happened, I had no idea what I was going to do for a next job or career. I had no idea how to do it. I had no idea how to do transition. I had no idea really what I was facing. And I had no idea how to understand the world that lay ahead of me. I like to say now that I had no intelligence preparation of the career battlefield, and I certainly had no idea what civilian employers expected. So when I landed in that training manager job for the air freight facility, I found myself for quite a while, first several months, going, what are we doing here? This isn't very motivating. All we're really doing is kicking boxes. But over time and talking with other members of the leadership team, I realized that we were doing far more than kicking boxes. We're enabling trade. We're helping small companies grow. We're helping folks that were trying to make a living. We were part of an economic community that was just as important as our military service was. It was just very different. Now, I hear the same kind of thing from the military veterans that I work with today and have worked with over the years. See, this whole new world is different, and you're probably never going to get the same rush that you got in the military. Now, some jobs you might, but other jobs, maybe not so much. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. The truth is that business is foundational to our republic, and free trade drives our society and our success. Quite frankly, it's part of what we as veterans have been fighting for, and it's a new way for us to serve America. Those of you that may have been out in the commercial business world for a while, that America always needs business, and business always needs top talent. And as a man who's been on the employer side for the better part of over 2 decades, I can tell you that you as military veterans truly are top talent. Today, I'm going to share a few insights from the employer side of the desk. It's a book that I recently wrote. And I'm going to try to help you bridge the gap between where you've been, you, and the future employers you're going to be engaging with. So why is it so important to understand the employer insight? Well, guess what? They have the jobs. And if you really want to be successful in the civilian market, you need to understand what they need, what they want, and what they expect. So the following insights I'm going to share, like I said, are selected from my recently released book. Came out in July. It debuted as a #1 new release in the job hunting category on Amazon, which I was pretty honored to see that happen. And the content has 5 separate sections in it to help you become more aware of the world you're about to enter. There'll be some general business insights, some comment on culture, some issues regarding transition, networking, and then some discussion of talent acquisition, recruiting, and interviewing. We're not going to talk about all 151 of them. That would be death by PowerPoint, I think, and that's never good. But I'm going to have some highlighted ones in here that I think are relevant to what's on most people's minds most frequently. So first, the very first one in the book is employers have work to do, and we need people who are going to fit and add value to our team. That really is the bottom line for this whole career transition employment thing. Everything else that goes into this, the search, the interviewing, the talent, the selection of new talent, the job offers, all add up to 2 things. One, we've got work to do, and we need people who are going to fit and add value to the team. The second point, job openings exist because we have unfilled business needs, not so much because you need a job. I know when I was in career transition, the most important thing for me was making sure I got a job. And I quickly found out that most employers really didn't care that I particularly needed a job. They had work to do and they had unfilled needs. And if I didn't demonstrate how I best can do that work and fit on their team, they moved on to somebody else pretty quickly. So the point of this is that you need to focus your search on how you're going to help the businesses meet the needs that exist, that created that open position. You know, sometimes business conditions change and job opportunities that might have been posted or that you might have heard of, they get suspended. They're just gone. Now, sometimes the employers will reopen it because conditions went to something different and now they need that job opening again. And sometimes it's just gone forever. The fact of the matter is, most of the time when this happens, you're never going to know why. And guess what? That's not going to change. Employers are going to move on to do something else. The point here, if you're in job search or career transition, is if this happens, attempt to do some follow-up. But if the follow-up isn't fruitful, find your next opportunity. You always want to have multiple opportunities in the hopper. Okay? Next, all organizations have a life cycle, and you know, companies are where they are. And it impacts how we operate. Understanding where a company is in its life cycle and how you can add value can make you a more attractive candidate to the employer. You know, at launch and startup, that's all hands on deck. It's low resources. It's very focused on whatever it is that company's there to do. And that creates a certain kind of culture and a certain kind of need for talent, a certain kind of need for capability. But hopefully the business is successful, and at some point it starts to grow and expand. And with that, you'll see maybe a little bit more structure take place. Maybe you'll see a little bit more specialization. And as you move through that, eventually things are going to shake out and the business is going to stabilize and mature. And this is where you start to see more of the robust functions, maybe a little bit more, I'll say, sandboxes start to happen. And I don't say that negatively. I just mean that, that you know, there'll be more clear lines delineated of who's doing what. And that creates a different kind of set of expectations. And unfortunately, many companies face certain points where they start to decline. Okay. Now, there are great talent opportunities. There are great job opportunities in every one of these phases. I can tell you, I joined Dana Corporation, the multi-billion-dollar automotive supplier, when they were emerging from bankruptcy. They were clearly in a decline kind of a mode. And what they needed then was people who could cut through the chaff, figure out where to save money, how to create opportunities, and how to create a new set of policies, practices, procedures, and structures to meet their current and emerging needs. And I'm very proud to say that we were able to get through that decline period and then create a new life cycle of growth. And they're continuing to do well today. Next, employers are always going to try to pay the least possible for top quality talent. Now look, this isn't personal, it's just business. Paying for employees is a cost to the company. It's just math and finance. So understand that employers are going to try to pay as little as possible. Good employers do a really good job of making sure that their pay ranges and their benefit packages and stuff are competitive for the markets that they're operating in, and that they are attractive to top talent, so they truly are bringing it in. But they're going to try to do as little as possible, pay as little as possible to reduce expenses. Now I'm going to take a quick break out of the share and see if there's anything going on here in the chat. Okay, I don't see any additional comments or anything, so we're going to keep on rolling. You know, as I mentioned earlier, when I was in job search, that was my focus. It was my priority. And it's important to remember when you're a career transition in job search that you particularly are not the employer's top priority. It is important to remember that they don't necessarily have time to figure you out. You know, all businesses operate inside of an external environment, and business leaders have to focus on process and product and people. And in that people lane, they've got a lot of work to do with their current team to make sure they're engaging people and leveraging them and helping develop them. And then they have this little piece at the bottom about making sure we plan and source and recruit and interview and select and onboard new talent. You as an individual are one small dot on a very large, very busy radar screen. Now, I don't say this to discourage anyone, but I say this so you keep perspective. While your search is your most important thing, it is not the most important thing to everybody else. So how do you get noticed on this big, busy radar screen? Well, first, you got to learn as much as you can about the opportunity and about the company, and you've got to network. You have to get out and you have to meet with people. We'll talk a little bit more about networking in a little bit. Similarly, it's your responsibility to make it easy for employers to notice you. Convince the employers that you are the best candidate to fill their opening, and that do those two magic things that we started with. Prove that you're the best to do the work, and prove that you're going to be the greatest fit for the team. Okay. Employers have a sea of things and a sea of opportunity and gazillions of people out there who want to work with and for them. And it's important that you look for employers because they aren't necessarily going to look for you particularly. I kind of screwed this one up when I got out in the civilian world. I was so eager to make an impact and so used to going into organizations and making an impact right away that I started off by calling the employer's baby ugly. They said, how are you going to make a difference here? And I said, well, based on my 20 minutes of knowledge, I would look at this and I would change this and I would change that and I'd redo this and I'd start over on that. And I went from being perceived as a value-adding member of the team to kind of a cranky critic. I called the baby ugly, and it took me, they hired me, but it took me a little while to get past that. I was just trying to make an impact. I was just trying to say, look, here's where we can do some new things. You hired me for a new set of eyes, and this is what I see. And that's important to do, but packaging that message is critically important too. Figure out how you can partner with the current leadership team to help evolve them to where they can be, but don't do it in a way where they think you're calling their baby ugly. So this may surprise some folks, but applying online is generally a waste of time. If you want to work somewhere, you need to network. You know, people hire people. So it's important for you to reach out, to connect with folks and get to know folks in the company, the HR folks at the company you want to get to, folks in the community that you want to join, okay? Studies will tell you that over 80% of the salaried professional jobs, the kind that many of you are trying to land in, are landed by networking. People who you met. 80% of that 80% are landed by second and third tier networks. So somebody you networked with is networked with somebody else who knows somebody that has an opportunity. Conversely, applying online for salaried professional jobs, according to several studies, will land you a job about 5% of the time. Applying online needs to be part of your strategy, but I think you give it its due course. Don't focus your energies on low payoff strategies. You got to get out and you got to meet people. Virtually, now with Zoom and all the great capabilities that exist in the virtual world today, it frankly is a bit easier, but you still got to meet people, excuse me, and make connections and let them know what you're bringing to the party and how you can help. This one is a particularly interesting one for me. I don't know how many times I've talked with folks, military veterans and otherwise, say, you know what, I can do anything. Well, I'll tell you what, if you say I'll do anything, then we have nothing for you. You see, we don't hire anything jobs. We hire specific people for specific jobs because we have specific things that need to get done. So if you come in and say, I can do anything, that's too vague. It tells me you're not focused. And it doesn't help me understand how you're going to add value to my organization. Excuse me. This point is similar when you're networking or you're doing informational interviews. When you're meeting somebody new and saying, you know, I'd really like to meet with you because I'm in career transition, I'm looking for opportunities. When you're doing that, most people want to help. But it's really hard for them to help if they don't know how you need help. You know, if you know that you want to enter the cyber world, you want to be in the IT world, okay, that's a world. Specifically, what do you want to do? Do you want to do cybersecurity? Do you want to do preemptive stuff? Do you want to do recovery stuff? Do you want to set up hardware? Do you want to be focused on software? What is it you're going to do? When you're more clear about that, those folks in your network that are willing to help are more able to help you achieve that goal. When you're vague, they don't know what the goal is, and their ability and, quite frankly, willingness to help is diminished. Excuse me. Most employers look for people with, I call them 5 A's. Do you have the aspiration? Do you have the desire to do what we need done? Do you have the ability? I mean, can you do the work? Excuse me. Do you have the availability? Are you going to be able to join us when we need you to join us? And do you have the agility to move around and work in different situations that our culture, our tempo, or our expectations may require? And then we look for people of action. Do you understand what actions are needed? And are you willing and able to take those actions to add value? Now, it's important that you have all those, but it's also important that you figure out how to let us as employers know that you have them. When you engage with us in conversation, do you have answers to our questions that are related to these A's? Next, a little bit about culture. You know, our culture is what it is. Whether we're a startup or in decline or mature or wherever we happen to be, whether a manufacturer, a service industry, whether global or local, large or small, we have a culture, and it is what it is. Excuse me. And it's important to us. And we want people to join the team to be accretive to that culture. You want to help us evolve. What we don't want is folks to come in and join us and help us make something that you've already left. That help make us something that you already left. Okay. Many folks in the civilian world are unfamiliar with the military. And if you as a military veteran try to come in and militarize the culture, it's probably not going to go well. I think a really important point for people to understand is that career transition is a space of its own. It is not where you've been. It's not where you're going to land. It is a particular place and space that has certain people and processes and tools and techniques that are unique to it, that you didn't have to know and learn when you were in your prior job or career, and that may or may not be relevant in your future career, but they're necessary to understand as you move from past to the future. Oftentimes I deal with folks that are so focused on landing somewhere, they forget how to get from here to there. They forget to focus on the transition itself, and they miss out on learning all the tools, techniques, processes, and meeting with people that can truly help accelerate their transition to wherever it is they intend to land. So I'm going to stop sharing again for a second. See if there's any questions, comments, anything. Okay. And we're going to keep rolling. You know, pilots have to keep their eyes focused on two things all the time, right? They got to keep their eyes on the dials to understand the pieces and parts and the data that's going on with the aircraft and the flight, but they also have to keep their eyes on the horizon to see what's out ahead of them. Similarly, when you're in career transition, you need to keep a dual focus on getting yourself prepared, understanding who you are, what you're bringing to the party, how you define success, learning about your transition environment and all those kind of things. And the other piece is you got to focus on getting known. You know, the world's a busy place, and if people don't know you're out there and don't know what you're interested in and aren't aware of your intent to transition or your desire for landing, they're not going to know of you, and you're not going to be availed the opportunities. So make sure as you look at your career transition, keep your eyes on the dials and keep your eyes on the horizon. Get prepared and do the work you need to do to get known. Now, similar earlier, we said, you shouldn't try to, perhaps militarize the culture of the new organization, but you need to remember that your career shaped you and it's a launch pad for your future. There are many great things that you learned and experienced as a military service member. And even if you're not, from prior jobs with prior organizations. What's really important to do is to figure out what those things were and figure out how to leverage them in the present so you can help meet your employer's needs. That means you got to know who you are, what you're bringing to the party. You got to also understand what the employers are expecting. Now, you may not be able to employ these things directly in your transition in the future job and career, but they're part of who you are, and they might be helpful as you try to succeed doing new and different things. Sometimes in career transition, and it's happened to me, you can get caught up in the dailies. A lot of little things can distract you, and they can kind of cause you to get your eye off the ball. So it's important as you go through this thing is you got to stay focused on whatever your real goal is. Check in with yourself every once in a while and go, where am I? Am I making progress or am I just busy? Years ago, I worked for a CEO at an air freight company. Great leader. And he had this really interesting way of going around and meeting folks in the company. And he was very informal, very professional, but very informal. And he went by Joey. And he would walk by, and it didn't matter what level you were. He'd say hello and how are you doing this. And his question was, are you busy or are you adding value? And people thought it was kind of a trick question. It wasn't a trick question because he had great follow-ups. If people would say, man, I'm adding value, his follow-up was, how do you know? And then he could follow that conversation on the greater and greater breadth and depth. But he said, if they go, I'm just busy. I don't know how I add value. And then he would engage in a very good leadership discussion about how that shipping clerk or that accountant or that operations lead could best fit and support that location, that station, that business unit. It was really interesting, but you got to understand how to keep you focused on what your goal is. Be wary of not getting too distracted by things that don't matter. Transition moves at the speed of you. You got to create your own momentum when you're going through transition. One of the things that I've noticed when I've moved from the military and found myself in this transition space is, and I didn't appreciate it at first, is that the military organization exists to cause us to be successful individually, as teams, as larger organizations, our units, right? And there's a certain set of expectations and a certain set of routines and a certain set of structures and a certain set of supports that are all out there that create momentum and create inertia and create initiative. So you can kind of, work within the flow of things and keep moving forward. When you're on your own in career transition, you're on your own. And momentum doesn't exist unless you create it. The other thing that's important about, let's call it op tempo, how things move, is understanding whether you're a fast-paced, do-it-all kind of person all at once, or whether you're more of a measured, kind of a slower paced, thorough kind of take that kind of approach. And then as you look at job opportunities, you want to line yourself up. You know, chess is played at a certain speed, right? But so is hockey. Now, if you try to play hockey at the speed of chess, you're going to lose. If you try to play chess at the speed of hockey, you're probably going to lose. Excuse me. Similarly, for different kinds of missions on certain kind of jobs, you know, you want to get involved in a police organization. You want to be a police officer or a supporter in a police force, right? When police are out on a long-term surveillance, that is a certain kind of op tempo, pretty slow until something specific happens. That is an entirely different tempo and pace than if they're in hot pursuit. Understand your preferred pace and your flexibility to go at different paces, and pay attention to that as you go through transition and consider opportunities. Pardon my coughing here. Transition can be a long slog. You know, I liken it to a road march. You know, it's a heavy load. There's a lot to do. The path may be difficult, but at some point you have to take a break. You know, even the most high-performance sport cars need a pit stop. And any of you that have ever done a road march, you know that well-done road marches build in a break. They build in breaks so you can check your feet and change your socks. The same thing has to happen in career transition. Sometimes we get so caught up on the fact that things maybe aren't progressing the way we'd like, or perhaps maybe they're not, opportunities are not appearing as quickly or as robustly as we'd like. You can kind of get down on yourself, and some folks will work harder and harder and harder, but they never give themselves a break. So do yourself a favor as you go through this, build in the breaks, take the time, give yourself a pit stop, check your feet, change your socks. When you go through transition, you're going to get tons of advice, okay? Aristotle said back in the day about some things that it's not possible to make a universal statements, which are all true. Well, guess what? That's going to happen in career transition, and it's going to happen when you're engaging with potential new employers. Everybody's got a different perspective and a different experience base, okay? The important thing for you to know as someone who's considering what employers are looking for is that you take it all in. I always suggest you use what resonates for you, and the stuff that doesn't resonate off the top, just keep it in your toolbox, because someday it may just come in handy. I'm going to stop sharing here for a second again to check in, see if there's any comment, questions, or anything. Okay, and we will go back. All good. Thank you, Edward. And we will get back to sharing here. Next, I coined this phrase a couple years ago. If you want to do new work, your now work is to network. So what is now work? Well, it's about doing a great job in the job you're in, and it's about understanding how to be successful in doing that which you do, but it's also about learning how to do what you might be doing in the future. It's learning and applying something new, okay? Networking is absolutely critical in job search and career transition, because without a network, the great now work you're doing and the great new work you're doing are going to go unnoticed. People just aren't going to know who you are and what you're doing, or that you even exist. So as you look at new career opportunities, that new work, make sure to remember that your now work is to go out and network. So that brings up another point. What is networking? Now, there's a gazillion definitions of networking, but the one that works best for me is that networking is simply a conversation with a purpose. Now, there's a lot of ways to have that conversation, but networking at its essence is just a conversation with a purpose. Now, I've talked to a lot of veterans over the years, and like me, when I first got out, I was pretty introverted. I didn't know how to network. I didn't want to network. And I was a little scared of it, quite frankly. And one of the things that I've heard people say, and I understand thoroughly, is that they don't want to network because it feels like it's manipulation. And I understand that concern, but I offer this in response. Networking is networking and manipulation is manipulation. The difference is that in manipulation, one party is out to get whatever that one party wants and has no concern for any of the other parties involved in the conversation. Networking, on the other hand, is about a mutual give and take. Okay? It's about giving and receiving. It's about speaking and listening. It's about mutual regard for how you can help someone else and how they can help you. If you keep that dual focus of giving and taking and helping and receiving, I would suggest it's not manipulation by any stretch of the imagination. It is truly beneficial to you and the other party. So now that we've talked about what networking is, let's take a minute and go, what is it? How do I do it? Now, this is a little bit busy slide, but I'd like to start on the left. I'll always suggest that when networking, you need to start with yourself. Understand what's your overall purpose. What are you trying to do? Understand who you are, what you're bringing the party, how you define success, what you're looking for. And then start to understand what your purpose is for a particular networking interaction. So let's say your overall purpose is to land a cybersecurity job that pays at least $150,000 a year in Tucson, Arizona. Make that up, right? That's your overall purpose. Okay, check, got that one. What's your purpose for the particular networking interaction that you're going to engage in? Now, perhaps you're going to go to a live networking event, really meet people in person, maybe bump elbows or shake hands. When you get to that networking event, before you get to it, you probably ought to have a pretty good idea of what your purpose is for that event. Maybe your purpose is nothing more than getting used to shaking hands and telling your story. Maybe it's just practice for you. Or maybe your purpose for that session is to meet a particular person that you know is going to be there who works for a specific company that you're interested in. Or maybe it's something else, right? But understand and stay mindful of what your overall purpose is, and then be mindful of what your purpose for that particular networking interaction is for that day. So once you know you, go talk to people you know. Practice with them. Practice your pitch. Practice your story. Practice your ask. And it may feel a little silly at first, but that's okay. You're getting repetitions in. And as you talk to them and you get a little more comfortable, ask them who you might talk to next. And then you go talk to those folks. And you get practice with those folks and you get a little bit better. And ask them, who might I talk to next? And then all of a sudden you're going to find yourself talking with all new people that can be beneficial for growing your network and helping you get tapped into that big world of second and third tier connections, which is where most of the jobs get landed. So how do you do the particular networking interaction? It's really pretty simple. Have a pleasant greeting. Have a clear, concise, complete introduction. Listen actively. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And at some point in the conversation, professionally ask your ask, whatever that is, or share your information. Ask for a next meeting, which they may or may not accept. If they don't push them too hard. Thank them. Ask for other people they can suggest you might network with and offer to help them. And that offer may be something specific, or that offer may be kind of general, going, I'm not really sure how I could help, but if ever you need, just give me a call. Always say thank you and then do a follow-up appropriate to that particular networking engagement. Okay? Now, networks have different players in them, and there's a growth hierarchy for networking that I developed, quite a while ago. And any of you that's ridden on a subway in a major city, realize you got a lot of contact with people. I've been on subways all over the world, and specifically those in China, Hong Kong, other places in Asia. The sense of personal space can be a little different. And I had contact with a whole bunch of people. I bumped into people left and right on very crowded subways. But I wasn't connected to any of them. I think LinkedIn, quite frankly, has done a disservice by calling everybody a connection. A contact doesn't become a connection and then until there's some kind of purposeful action. One person reaches out to the other. One person engages the other in some kind of conversation, makes an ask, shares some information, and they start to develop some mutual interest, and they continue to connect. And over time, those connections, excuse me, that are based in mutual value, form some kind of a relationship. And for those folks you have relationships with, some portion of them are going to become advocates for you. These are the folks that are actually out there actively promoting you. Now, not everybody in your network is going to be an advocate, but you want to get as many of these folks as possible. So networks grow, and they grow according to effort and according to the typical pattern that I show on the slide. You know, a network, it's a living thing, and you need to attend to it. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about this whole talent acquisition and recruiting. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds with the whole process, but I think it's important to remember that this whole process is about screening people out. Now, I know I've, applied for jobs and I've networked for jobs and I've interviewed, and, you don't get every job you talk about. You don't get every job you apply for, and you certainly don't get every job for which you interview. And that's because the process is about screening people out. Last couple of companies I've been in, I was in charge of talent acquisition, the recruiting function for the company. And we had our recruiters typically had at least 20 different positions open, each person. Okay, each recruiter. And each of those positions got dozens or perhaps hundreds of applicants, online and otherwise. And the sheer volume of that work made it really, really hard to do. Okay, these good recruiters and good recruiting and talent acquisition teams really, truly do work hard. So their job is to figure out the best fit for the company, right? And they need to screen people out just to get the volume down to a manageable level. Excuse me. Now, if you apply online, this screen occurs typically automated, where they have applicant tracking systems that are set up for keyword searches and other things. And if anything doesn't match, you're gone. And what's left then maybe gets viewed by a human being. And that human being may or may not know the job really well, but they know what the job description says. And they're going to screen out rather, everything that doesn't look like a match. And they're going to forward that one or two that actually look like they're best matched to the HR manager or the hiring manager, so we can then do the interviews. So no matter what you think about how qualified you are, the screens are in place to exclude most people. Okay? I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but it's simple math, and it just is what it is. I tell you this, again, not to be a Debbie Downer, but to say, you know what? You're going to face rejection, and you need to make sure you steel yourself for it, because the right job's out there for you. You just may have to go through a bunch of work to get to it. What's one of the ways you can help get through that? Well, I can tell you that referrals work. If somebody I know and trust recommends you, I'm going to listen. Okay? If that person's got a great reputation and what they're presenting is relevant to my need, and I've got a good relationship with them, we don't have to be best friends, but if I have a good relationship with them and they say, you know what, Johnny's a great candidate for this job, your paperwork, your file, your record, your resume is going to go around the system, and it's going to get to the top of my pile, and it's at least going to get a look. And if it looks really good to me there, it's probably going to get an interview, at least a phone interview. Okay? So why does that matter to you? The more people you have in your network, the more likely it is you'll get someone that can potentially provide a referral to a decision maker who's focused on bringing people into their company. Next, let's say we get to that interview, we get through all those wickets, and we've got through all those screenings, and they bring you in. The interview starts the second you hit my property. If you got to drive through a security gate, be nice to the security guard. If you got to talk to somebody at a reception desk, make sure you're nice to the man or woman at the front desk. And I can tell you, they're paying attention. And I can also tell you, I'm going to ask you about them. I have had candidates in the past who were rude to our front security and our reception staff, and I didn't even interview them because the staff said these folks are horrible. So be nice to everybody and recognize the interview starts the second you're on my property. When you're interviewing, look me in the eyes, smile. It really does make a difference. You know, I don't know about you all, but most people like being around happy people. And if you can come to an interview and you can smile and you can look me in the eye and have a grown-up conversation with me, that's going to make a tremendous amount of difference. That may even overcome some of the technical bits that you may not be well aligned on. Because remember, we want people that can do the job and fit well and add value to the team. The fit well and add value is about behavior. And if I can have a good, honest adult conversation with you and you're smiling along the way, that goes a long way to convincing me that you might be a good fit for the team. One of the most important things when you're interviewing is to answer my asks, okay? If you can't understand the question I'm asking in an interview, that gives me concern. But that's a technical bit. You may not have had the experience. But if you don't understand the question and you try to buffalo your way around it, that's a bigger concern to me, okay? Now, job postings, job descriptions, job advertisements are really kind of an asset, I think, for the job seeker, for the person in transition. A well-done job posting, job description, job advertisement is a menu of all the things they're asking for. So many years of experience with this, so much knowledge about that, these kind of degrees, so on and so forth, right? Those are the asks. As you prepare for the interview, break that document down into its individual pieces and understand what each one is asking for so you can prepare yourself to answer each one of the asks. I've done thousands of interviews in all kinds of different formats. And at the end of the day, those people that can answer all my asks best are the ones that are going to get the offer. We're almost done with the slides here, okay? Next, remember, you may have done everything right and you might not have been selected. You know, as a military veteran, you're sometimes folks view you as kind of an outsider. 93% of the population never served in uniform, and only about 1% of the population joins the military today. So most folks don't have a common experience with you in that regard. Many of the folks that you're competing with for these jobs have spent their careers in companies and industries that you're trying now to break into. So don't be surprised if somebody else gets an offer and you don't. That's part of how it works, okay? But also don't burn a bridge. If you get rejected, you can go back and ask, you know, what could I have done different? They may or may not answer you. Most will not. Don't be surprised if that happens. But you can ask, and if they don't if they don't answer you, don't burn a bridge, okay? You want to respond professionally, either verbally or through email or with a letter. Say, thank you for the opportunity. I very much appreciate the time. I remain interested in this your company. And should something change, I'd be more than happy to talk to you again. If we hear that and you have a positive disposition about things, we might just remember you and have something better for you in the future. At the very least, we might know of other people that have jobs that might be great for you also. If you get an offer, that's awesome. You should celebrate. But remember, an offer letter is a business document. It's not a love letter, okay? Celebrate, but read the document, understand the terms and conditions, and treat it as a business document. And finally, I'd just like to offer that every one of us can bridge the gap. Every one of us can move from where we've been in the past, and yep, that's me, to where we are today. I thank you very much for your time today. If you want to learn more, my contact information is here. It's a copy of the book cover. It is available on Amazon. We cover just a handful of the 151 insights from the employer side of the desk. So I will stop sharing now and see if there's any questions. Okay, so open for questions. I think we have, what, another 10 minutes or so, 9 or 10 minutes. And looks like something popped up in the chat. I do appreciate the comments, and it's been a pleasure. Yeah, Jake, you said, I don't know why people burn bridges. Yeah, boy, it's kind of mind-boggling why people do that. I get the emotion, but man, you got to be careful what you're doing. You can share your emotion personally or with somebody outside the employment discussion. All right. If there's nothing else, I will give you a few minutes back and you can dial into whatever's coming next. One last chance. Anything else? Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Be well. Take care. If you need anything, feel free to tag me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in learning more, you can get to Amazon and pick up my book either in hardcover or Kindle. Thank you all. Be well.